Welcome to Revival Cycles Tech Talk. I'm Stefan, and today we're talking about our brand new momentary contact push button handlebar controls. Now, these are the ones that we've designed and manufactured right here in the workshop in Austin, Texas, and I can't wait to show you guys all the different features we've packed into these and maybe even a little bit about how we made them. All right, so we're really excited to finally announce our very first in-house design and manufactured product that we've got ready for sale, and it happens to be these momentary contact handlebar switches. These are really a simple project, a simple product that ends up becoming more complicated as you get into it, but let's start with just what these do. So these get mounted on your handlebars and they're used to control things like your horn or your headlight or your starter, that type of stuff. And the reason that we made them is because factory controls are ugly. Of course, there are a few other solutions on the market and those all work fine, but there were aspects of them that we weren't happy with. That was the main impetus for why we decided to create our own. So why don't we show you a little bit about what doesn't work about the stuff that's in the market, and that'll help explain why these are the way they are. We need the handlebars to explain. So let's start with what Motogadget's offered. And this one's pretty easy because when you look at this Motogadget switch, you see these are all square corners and it's all just kind of chunky, flat surfaces. It's just not a very elegant design and the buttons don't really integrate with any of this surface. So it's just kind of clunky and let's use the word primitive. This seems like a very primitive solution, and 5 years ago this was great because it's all there was, but we think that there's something better, and that's why we've incorporated very nice, clean reveals so that the buttons really integrate with the rest of the housing and they look like they belong there. They didn't just get slapped on this brick of a face. Next up, wait. This is future Stefan, and I have to stop and interrupt for just a second because you forgot to talk about the 3-button Motogadget M switch. Now, we've used these a bunch. They're great. They work well, but they do have another couple of problems that we wanted to solve. The big one is this single screw that holds the whole thing together. That means that there's a single point of failure, and if this screw backs off, the whole thing can fall off your bars. Also, when you do tighten this single screw, you end up with a gap on the opposite side because there's nothing holding it together. Whether you put that gap on the top or the bottom, it's always there, and that just kind of bothers us. And then lastly, this also has an issue where having a button on the opposite side of the controls always leaves one just kind of out in the breeze and ergonomically difficult to access. And we've never really found an arrangement that makes these that convenient to use. They do work in a pinch, but you know, we thought we could do something a bit better. Now, back to whatever it is you were talking about. Motogadget came out with this, which is the M-Switch Mini, and another one of my favorite solutions for handlebar controls. This is really well packaged. It's got some huge advantages because it has the wires already pre-attached, potted in, waterproof, and this really nice multi-cut inductor cable. But this one kind of falls short in a few areas because, again, we've got a very basic, simple, hard edge design. But the real issue is that the buttons themselves are quite small. And for some people, when wearing gloves or with much larger hands, big clubby thumbs like me, although I like these, some people don't appreciate this small size. So we wanted to get back to a full-size switch that has a more significant button to find while you're riding. So these guys are great. I do still recommend them, but we wanted to have a little bit different solution. All right, next up we had the offering from Motone. Now, Motone came out with their switches, and you know what? These are also really good. It's why we sell them. But there were some things we weren't that happy about with the design aspects here, and that was the way that this pinches in makes it a little bit difficult to integrate with like a throttle tube or throttle assembly, or when you butt this up with a clutch or brake perch, you see this gap and it just doesn't quite integrate. There are also a few issues with how the buttons transition into the housing, and I know these are really small, nitpicky things, but at Revival, we're really, really picky about the details. That's kind of where you separate from a good build to a great build. It's in those details. And then the real kicker for the Motone switches was the logo is really pronounced, and that ends up being very forward on the controls in the cockpit, and that influences the visual appearance. And also, when it is brought next to a grip, you've got this discontinuity between how the buttons line up versus how the back of the clamp lines up, and it's this really thin section that gets to a larger section. And you know, these are just preferences and opinions, but we didn't really like the way that this came out from an aesthetic standpoint. Also, the triangle arrangement of the buttons won't line up with a perch, won't line up with a throttle assembly, and we felt like having everything in line was more important. So those were kind of the big drivers for what we wanted to make. From there, we started to prototype and iterate and started to get down to this type of a design where all of the reveals and the interface to the buttons is very clean. It looks like they all belong there. Everything lines up really nice. We've got consistent radiuses that transition from the top and sides of the switch into the back of the switch. So when we bring this close to the grip, it actually seems like it belongs there. It actually seems to fit, and you still get very good ergonomic access to all three buttons. Having all three buttons in a line is just a little bit cleaner. It saves a little bit of room on the bar. Sometimes controls get really tight and you just don't have the space. So we've designed this to be a minimum size for what is necessary to operate as a button. And we did want to let everyone know who made it, so we've added a small logo, a small mark to let everyone know that this is a genuine, in fact, Revival Cycles part. But if you don't want to show that off to the world, it's fine. You just flip it around, and then when you butt that up to the grip, it's incognito, it's stealth, and you don't have to be all branded and brand forward. But if you'd rather, if you want to show off that you've got your stuff from Revival, go ahead and put that on the outside. It looks great. The buttons that we're using are effectively the same buttons that you find on the traditional Motogadget M switches. These are IP67 rated momentary contacts that have a 3 amp rating, and that means they're fine for operating simple stuff like a starter solenoid or maybe a relay or low power applications, turn signal relays, that type of stuff, and certainly any type of power distribution module like an M unit or M unit Blue. That said, the install is relatively straightforward. You'll notice these buttons all thread into the housings, and that one's pretty tight, but there we go. They all thread in, just really simple, and they have screw terminals on the back, so you can just strip the wire, tin it with a little bit of solder, just a very short amount, put it in there, tighten the screw, and it all threads right back into the housing. The idea is that the wires exit from this housing directly into the bar. That does mean you need to drill a hole in your bar. That lets the wires go in, and then you'll have to drill another hole where the wires come back out. It's really not that difficult with these types of arrangements. The accuracy and position of the hole is not completely critical, so no need for a jig, just a good center punch and a little bit of skill with a cordless drill will get you done. With that, I mean, really, these are a very simple product. It was fairly complicated to actually machine these because we didn't want to have to do any secondary operations. We wanted to make sure that the surface finishes from the machining operation, the genuine article of how this is manufactured, the fingerprint of where it came from is always there, and it needed to look good. So if you look close, you'll see there are some small machining marks, and those have been pretty carefully developed so that they are aesthetically pleasing and still small enough, smooth enough that we wouldn't have to do any secondary finishes, and we feel like they came out pretty well. So as I mentioned in the intro, these were designed and manufactured here at Revival, so that manufacturing process, that does get a little bit involved. We actually had to work out not only the design and where every single radius, fillet, surface, blend, etc. was, but then also develop every single tool path, so telling the machine exactly where the cutter should move and how it should move, and that's determined by getting the final finish the way that we wanted. We wanted to see some amount of the manufacturing process in the final part. So we wanted to see these machine marks, but they needed to be aesthetically pleasing. They needed to look like they belonged and that they were done in a really professional way. So we spent a fair amount of time refining the tool paths, refining the process, so that we were able to leave these machine marks without having to blend them out into a smooth, polished finish. Once we got all of our tool paths worked out, then we needed to anodize these parts because we wanted some to be black, we wanted some to be clear. We decided we were going to anodize both, and that's a little bit different than what Motogadget chose, and I'll show you why that's a problem. Motogadget has made their housings, and these are really nice aluminum polished housings. They're super shiny, and then the moment you get them and you set them down on your bench and you move it at all, it is scratched, and it will scratch every time because this is just a raw aluminum. Sure, you could polish this back out and you'll spend the rest of your life polishing your switch housings if you want them to stay looking good. we've put a clear anodize on our housings, and that means that if you do slide them around on the bench, if you move them around, drop them, ding them, hit them with a little bit of force, nothing's going to show. This finish is really, really durable. Same thing for the black. It doesn't really matter. If you push them around on the bench, they still come out perfectly clean. So that was one thing that was important. We've always struggled keeping our Motogadget M-Switch polish looking good, and it's basically a losing battle. So we decided we'd solve that problem by clear anoing even the silver parts. So once we figured out tool paths and finishes and all that stuff, there's also the matter of making this manufacturing kind of scalable or making it kind of cost effective. So we had to come up with all of our own tooling and jigging and all these sorts of things. And that's why such a simple product can turn into a complicated project. And we're really happy that we've made it through this first one. We're excited to offer it to you guys. And these are just going on sale now, so be first to get in line. They're going to sell out quick, but once you get on the waiting list, your spot will be secured for the next production run that's coming up soon. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this tech talk, and subscribe so you don't miss another update on the new and interesting things that we're doing here at Revival. And comment, let us know what you want to see, let us know what you want us to make, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next tech talk. Thanks for watching.